I sold so many of these back when I did craft shows, and the best thing is the upfront investment cost is really low. I don't know if you've ever looked into having custom pins made, but the minimum orders for just a single design are pretty stinking high. So 10 pins for 227 Canadian dollars. Holy crap. Here we make kick-ass art on a cheap-ass budget, so you won't be out of pocket too much on this one. Your biggest initial investment will be a pack of this inkjet printable shrink plastic.
I recommend going with the printable shrink plastic versus the stuff you draw on directly for two reasons. Firstly, you're going to be able to produce pins a lot more consistently, a lot more quickly if you are printing out your images, not drawing an original every time. Secondly, the way the printer lays down the ink is a lot more clean and professional than any other drawing tool I've tried on shrink plastic. That said, experiment and do what works for you. This is just the method I've developed after my own trial and error experiments.
You'll also need some butterfly pin backs, some super glue, and a glossy top coat. I like to use UV resin for this, but if you don't like to work with resin for any reason, you can pick any polyacrylic top coat you like. I put a link to my supply list in the description of this video for your shopping convenience.
The other thing you're going to need is access to a computer and an inkjet printer. If you don't have these things at home, your local library can probably hook you up. I should say that you can't use the large format copy printers that are in a lot of offices. Those generate heat, and that heat is going to mess up your shrink plastic. So it definitely has to be an inkjet printer.
So we'll go through this part pretty quick. I'm jumping onto Google Docs here. I've already imported and laid out my images for printing. You guys don't want to watch that. These are some photos of the 31 monsters I made last fall. You could also use drawings that you scanned in or some royalty-free public domain or stock images. When you're laying out your images for printing, just keep in mind that the final item will be about half the height of the item as it prints. So for example, if I want a 1-inch tall pin of this witch, I'm gonna want to print it out at about 2 inches tall. Now, while we're in Google Docs here, we're gonna do this trick that I figured out that makes your finished pins look a lot more polished. I'm gonna draw a white box over everything and then put it to 50% transparency. I'm putting this over top of my images. I know this looks weird on screen, but I promise when you shrink your plastic down, this step helps them look so much better. Here I'm just adjusting the text wrapping settings on my images so that they sit behind the white box I just drew. You can do this with any software you're familiar with. Basically, you just need a white box at 50% transparency on top of what you're printing. Now we can print these out. If you have to adjust the paper settings for your printer, choose the matte photo paper option. I'm gonna let the ink dry down for a bit before moving on. Now I'm cutting these out. I like using tiny scissors because it gives me good control. You can use whatever you like, but I've personally never had much luck using a craft knife to cut out this stuff. I don't know if a Cricut or a Silhouette would work. I've never personally used those machines. Now we can arrange our cutouts on a small baking sheet. I like to shrink mine in this little dedicated craft oven I have. I just thrifted a toaster oven. Some people use a heat gun, but if you're doing them in the oven like me, make sure you're leaving a good amount of space between each item. Sometimes these guys can curl up when they're shrinking and stick together. If at any point it looks like the shrinking has just stalled and is not moving forward anymore, just try cranking up the heat a little bit. Definitely read the instructions that come with your shrink plastic here. In the Shrinky Dinks brand, they actually pack a lot of great tips and tricks, so these are some instructions that are worth the read. If yours come out like mine with just a slight curve to them, you can flatten them out by smashing them between two pieces of wood until they cool down. Alright, here are my shrunken little guys. Now I've got to glue the pin backs on. These are super smooth out of the packages, so I scuff them up a bit with a nail file, wipe off the dust, and use a little drop of super glue to stick these on the backs of my shrunken plastic. I let that super glue dry for about an hour, and then I come back and either do a tiny bit of super glue over the edge of the pin back or cover the entire back, including the base of the pin, with a layer of UV resin. This helps you ensure that the pin back is never coming off. We'll let that dry or cure, and then it's time for the finishing touch of a glossy top coat. I stab the pins into some foam or cardboard to hold the pins while I finish them up. When that final coat is cured, you can reattach the butterfly backs and the pins are ready to go. I hope this video helps you make your own affordable custom enamel look pins. I've been Jane Sawyer. Give this video a like, follow me on the socials, subscribe for more kick-ass art on a cheap-ass budget, and I'll see you on the next one.